You know how some people inherit jewelry or maybe an old family home? Me? I inherited a vineyard. My name is Valeria Monera, and I grew up on a stretch of land in Napa Valley, California, where the air itself always seemed to carry a faint sweetness, grapes ripening in the sun, fermenting oak barrels in the cellar, the earth breathing life into something bigger than us. To outsiders, it looked like wealth. Rows and rows of vines rolling across 400 acres. A stone farmhouse my father imported brick by brick from Spain. Cellars lined with bottles worth more than cars. But here's the truth no one ever saw. My family didn't measure wealth in money. At least, not at first. My father, Miguel Monera, built the vineyard with his bare hands. He was the kind of man who could walk into a barren field and somehow see a future there. He planted the first vines with nothing but borrowed tools, blistered palms, and faith that one day the soil would repay him. And my mother, Lucia, was nothing like the image people had of a winemaker's wife. She wasn't draped in pearls or flowing silk gowns, no. She was a school teacher who wore simple cotton dresses and carried secondhand books in her satchel. If she ever flashed diamonds, they were the kind that glistened in her eyes when she laughed. From the very beginning, they raised me to believe one thing: money without work means nothing. I learned that lesson the hard way. At 10 years old, I begged my parents for a pair of designer sneakers. Every other kid at my public school had them, and I was tired of being the odd one out. My father just smiled and said, "Then earn them." That summer, while other kids were splashing in pools, I was bent over grapevines in the blistering sun, picking bunch after bunch until my hands were raw. I bottled wine in the cellar. I swept the floors of the tasting room until they shone. And when I finally handed over my crumpled bills for those sneakers, they meant more to me than anything else in the world. Not because of the brand stitched on the side, but because I had paid for them with sweat. That's how I grew up. Rich in land, yes. Surrounded by luxury technically, but grounded in work, humility, and the idea that character is the only inheritance that matters. At least, that's what I thought back then. Because life has a cruel way of teaching you that not everyone shares your values. Some people only see what they can take. And years later, when I met the man who would become my husband, I had no idea he was about to shatter every lesson my parents tried to instill in me. But before that betrayal, there was one moment in my teens that scarred me the first time I learned how greed can twist even the closest bonds. And it came from someone I thought was my friend. Growing up in a vineyard might sound like a dream, but the truth is, it's also isolating. I had friends from school, of course, kids who lived in neighborhoods with endless streets and noise, kids who went to amusement parks on weekends, whose parents paid for everything. But on weekends, I was in the vineyard. My parents expected me to work, and honestly, I didn't mind. I loved the land. I loved the smell of crushed grapes and the sound of fermentation bubbling in the barrels. But that isolation made me vulnerable. At 16, I met Sophia. She was dazzling, effortlessly beautiful, confident, and the kind of girl who seemed to glide through life without a care. Her family didn't have money, but she carried herself as if she owned the world. She smiled at everyone and whispered secrets like she was an oracle. We became inseparable. She'd come to the vineyard every Saturday, and together we'd pick grapes, sneak into the wine cellar, and invent little games that made work feel like play. Or so I thought. It wasn't until that winter that I realized what kind of person Sophia really was. My father had entrusted me with a small plot of land on the vineyard, a space just big enough to experiment with my own grape varieties. I was proud, pouring every ounce of energy into it. Sophia pretended to care. She offered advice. She helped me plant. She laughed at my jokes. She made me feel like I had a partner in the world. And then she stole it. I still remember the morning I walked into the greenhouse and saw her there, grinning at a parcel of rare grape saplings she claimed were her idea. My heart froze. Every seed I had planted, every late night I had spent researching soil mixtures, every dream I had nurtured, she'd taken it and tried to claim it as her own. I confronted her. I expected a denial, a flustered apology. Instead, she laughed. Valeria, you're too trusting, she said. You do all the work, I just have the charm. I don't think I've ever felt rage and disbelief at the same time. The betrayal cut deeper than anything else in my life, deeper than the harsh lessons my parents tried to teach me. Someone I trusted, someone I called friend, had no respect for anything I cared about. For weeks, I withdrew. I avoided her calls, ignored her messages, and buried myself in the vineyard. But Sophia wasn't done. She started telling other kids at school that the vineyard project was hers, that she had taught me everything I knew. I felt invisible. I felt powerless. And for the first time, I tasted a bitter truth. Not everyone plays fair, and some people will step on you without a second thought. But here's the thing about betrayal, it has a way of igniting something inside you. It can either break you, or it can awaken you. For me, it was the latter. I spent that winter in silence, observing. Not just Sophia, but the world, the way people smiled while hiding sharp edges, the way greed and envy could fester in even the brightest souls. I began to understand that if I wanted to protect what was mine, I couldn't rely on trust alone. I would have to be smarter, sharper, and more patient than anyone around me. And that's exactly what I started to do. I didn't tell anyone what happened. I didn't seek revenge immediately. I waited. I watched, and I began to plan. Because in my world, betrayal is only the beginning. And as it turns out, Sophia wasn't my last lesson in deceit. By the time I turned 22, I thought I had learned to guard myself. I was sharper now, quieter, more observant. The vineyard had become my sanctuary, the one place I could pour my heart and know that no one could steal it, or so I thought. Then he appeared. His name was Lorenzo, and he had the kind of charm that made people forget to think. He was tall, impeccably dressed, with a smile that promised the world and eyes that seemed to see straight through you. I met him at a charity gala in Florence. He approached me with compliments so smooth they felt rehearsed, yet intoxicating. I laughed at his jokes, listened to his stories, and yes, I fell for him. I was careful. I wasn't the naive girl who had trusted Sophia. But Lorenzo had a way of disarming me. He knew when to push, when to pull back, and when to make me feel like I was the only person in the room. Within months, he proposed. The vineyard, my family, my dreams, he presented himself as a partner, someone who would share everything with me. And I, exhausted from years of guarding myself, believed him. That's when the trap snapped shut. It started with small things. He questioned my decisions about the vineyard, subtly undermining my authority. Then he suggested better ways to manage the finances, ways that sounded smart until I realized he had siphoned a significant portion of the funds into accounts I didn't know existed. I confronted him. He smiled, shook his head, and said, "Valeria, it's not theft, it's strategy. You're too emotional to see the bigger picture." The man I loved was taking everything from me, not just money, but trust, confidence, and a sense of safety I had fought so hard to build. It escalated. He isolated me from friends, insisting they didn't understand me the way he did. He convinced my parents I was making reckless choices, creating a narrative where I appeared unstable, irrational, even greedy. Every step I tried to take toward independence was met with manipulation and control. I remember the night I realized the truth. I was in the greenhouse, my hands dirty with soil, surrounded by the vines I had nurtured since childhood. He came in, smiling as if nothing was wrong, and casually mentioned plans to sell part of the vineyard, my vineyard, to fund one of his ventures. I froze. Every dream I had, every ounce of pride I had built, was being stripped away. The betrayal wasn't just personal, it was systemic. Every word, every smile, every promise he had made was a lie. And in that moment, I knew I couldn't let him win. Not like Sophia. I would fight back. I would protect what was mine. But this time, I wouldn't rush, I wouldn't act in anger. I would plan. And when the time came, he would regret ever thinking he could control me. Because in my world, betrayal isn't just a wound. It's a lesson, a spark, A signal that the real game has begun. And the rules of this game? I wrote them. Betrayal has a way of sharpening the senses. Once Lorenzo showed his true colors, I knew open confrontation would be useless. He thrived on drama, on turning every argument into a spectacle where he always looked like the victim. So I learned a new strategy: fight silently, strike strategically, and never reveal the full hand. The vineyard became my command center. I spent nights going through finances, contracts, and every legal document he had touched. Every loophole he left, every overreach he had committed, became ammunition. I documented everything meticulously. If he thought he could manipulate the system, he was wrong. At the same time, I rebuilt my network. I reached out to former employees, trusted friends, and advisors I had once ignored. Slowly, carefully, I stitched together a web of support that Lorenzo couldn't see. I didn't argue or accuse, I simply strengthened my position. The silent war was brutal. On the surface, I played the role of the obedient, forgiving wife. I smiled at his jokes, nodded at his plans, and let him believe he was in control. But beneath the surface, I was methodical. Every decision he tried to make without consulting me, every step he took to isolate or manipulate, I countered quietly. There were nights I lay awake staring at the ceiling, imagining the moment I would confront him with irrefutable proof of his deceit. It wasn't about revenge in the messy, emotional sense, it was about justice, about reclaiming what was mine. And slowly, I began to see cracks in his armor. Lorenzo was overconfident. He underestimated me because I had been careful, because I smiled and agreed when he expected compliance. Every false step he made, every miscalculation, I logged, I prepared, I weaponized. By the time he noticed that something was different, it was too late. The silent war had already been won. He didn't know it yet, but the rules of the game had changed. And in this game, I was the only player who could decide the outcome. I had learned the hard way that people like Lorenzo can't be reasoned with. They can't be argued into change. They must be outmaneuvered. And that's exactly what I was doing, one careful move at a time, with precision, patience, and unwavering focus. Because the truth about betrayal is this: it can crush you, or it can fuel you. And I was choosing the latter. The day finally came. The day I had been planning, preparing, and quietly orchestrating for months. Lorenzo still believed he was untouchable, that his charm and bravado would shield him. He had no idea that the woman he thought he controlled had become the one holding the strings. I invited him to the office, a neutral space, far from the vineyard, where he could intimidate with theatrics. Calm, composed, I poured a glass of wine and waited. Every step he took toward me, every smug smile, only reinforced my resolve. "Valeria," he said, attempting that familiar blend of charm and condescension. "I hope you've been reasonable." I smiled. A small, precise smile that contained no warmth. "I've been observant," I replied, setting down a folder thick with documents. His eyes flickered to it. Curiosity piqued. But he didn't react. "Observant?" he asked, a note of suspicion creeping into his voice. "Yes," I said, and opened the folder. Every fraudulent transaction, every hidden expense, every lie he had told me, every attempt to manipulate the business, all of it was there, documented, undeniable. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't shout. I let the truth speak for itself. His confidence faltered. First, a flicker in his eyes, then a tightness in his jaw. He opened his mouth, but no words came. Every excuse he had rehearsed, every justification he had prepared, fell apart under the weight of undeniable evidence. I leaned forward, my voice calm, measured, but sharp. "You underestimated me. You thought I would remain silent. You thought your games were invisible. But every lie, every betrayal is here. And now it ends." And woe case Stan, for the first time, I saw fear in him, a fear he had never experienced, because he had never faced consequences like these. Lorenzo realized that the woman he had tried to dominate, the woman he thought was powerless, had become the force that could dismantle him. He tried to salvage control, to charm, to manipulate, but it was too late. I had already dismantled the framework of his deceit. I was no longer reacting, I was commanding. And in that moment, I knew that this confrontation wasn't just about justice, it was about reclaiming my power, my life, and my identity. As he slumped into his chair, defeated, I closed the folder. No gloating, no spectacle, just quiet victory, because true power, I had learned, is not loud. It is deliberate, precise, and unyielding. And Lorenzo had finally learned the cost of underestimating me. The office was silent now. The confrontation had ended, Lorenzo's empire of lies reduced to fragments of paper and shattered illusions. But victory, I realized, was just the beginning. The real challenge wasn't exposing him, it was reclaiming myself, my life, my peace. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of months of tension slowly lift. For so long, I had been defined by his manipulations, his lies, and his demands. But now, every decision, every action was mine. And for the first time in years, the possibilities felt endless. The first step was practical, rebuilding the business he had tried to control. I reviewed every department, every team, every process. Some employees had been loyal, quietly watching and waiting for someone to stand up. Others had been complicit, entangled in Lorenzo's schemes. It was a delicate balance, accountability without chaos, correction without cruelty. I called meetings, set clear expectations, and reminded everyone that integrity, transparency, and respect were non-negotiable. Slowly, the company began to stabilize. What Lorenzo had nearly destroyed started to thrive, and I realized that healing wasn't just personal, it was structural. But it wasn't all about business. There were personal pieces to pick up too. The nights I had lost to anxiety, the relationships strained under his shadow, the self-doubt he had cultivated, all of it needed attention. I sought therapy, reconnected with friends I had distanced myself from, and reintroduced joy into my life. Small but deliberate acts of self-care that reminded me I was worth more than anyone's manipulation. One evening, sitting on my balcony with the city lights twinkling below, I reflected on the journey. Every plan, every careful step, every moment of restraint had led to this. I had not only survived Lorenzo's betrayal, but had transformed it into an opportunity to rise stronger. Empowerment, I realized, wasn't just about defeating someone else. It was about reclaiming your time, your energy, your confidence, your dreams. Lorenzo's downfall was a chapter in my story, but my life was no longer defined by him. I was the author now, and the pages ahead were mine to write. The city hummed quietly around me, and for the first time, I felt fully present, fully in control, and fully alive. Just when I thought the storm had passed, life reminded me that battles never truly end, they only evolve. Lorenzo's departure had left a vacuum, but a shadow lingered, subtle yet potent. Emails flagged by cautious employees, whispers of unfinished deals, and one particularly cryptic voicemail made it clear. The fallout wasn't over. It was late when I finally sat down to review the documents Lorenzo had left behind. At first glance, they seemed like harmless scraps, old contracts, irrelevant spreadsheets, minor debts. But one folder caught my eye. Strategic contingencies. I hesitated, a familiar chill running down my spine. Could it be another trap? Another scheme buried in his meticulous mind? With deliberate care, I opened the files. My eyes widened. He had left a network of hidden connections, investors, partners, even employees designed to pull the company into chaos if I ever gained control. I felt a mix of dread and exhilaration. Dread because his influence had been underestimated. Exhilaration because I now had the tools to outmaneuver him completely. Lorenzo may have played his game for years, but I had learned, adapted, and now I was several steps ahead. I began contacting loyal partners, securing agreements, and neutralizing potential threats before they could surface. It was a tactical dance, balancing power and persuasion, strategy and integrity. Each move required precision. A misstep could cost me everything I had fought for. Then came the unexpected. One of Lorenzo's former allies reached out directly. Their tone was apologetic, almost fearful. They confessed they had underestimated my resolve and asked for my guidance in untangling the mess Lorenzo had orchestrated. The irony wasn't lost on me. The puppet strings Lorenzo had so carefully controlled were now in my hands. I made a decision that would define not just this chapter, but the trajectory of my life. I wouldn't use this power for vengeance. I wouldn't manipulate or punish. I would dismantle the chaos, rebuild trust, and fortify the company and myself with strength born from resilience, not revenge. The final twist wasn't a dramatic confrontation or a last-minute betrayal. It was the quiet realization that true control comes from foresight, patience, and self-mastery. Lorenzo had underestimated one thing: the power of someone who refuses to be broken. As I closed the folder and leaned back in my chair, I allowed myself a small, triumphant smile. The storm had tested me, pushed me to my limits, and revealed the depth of my own strength. And now, for the first time, the future felt limitless, not because Lorenzo had fallen, but because I had risen. The office was quiet that morning, the sunlight spilling across the polished floors like a promise. I walked through the corridors with a sense of calm I hadn't felt in years, not the adrenaline-charged rush of battle, not the icy fear of looming traps, but a steady, grounding peace. All the pieces had fallen into place. Lorenzo's shadow had faded, his schemes neutralized, and the company was thriving under careful stewardship. But more importantly, I had thrived. I had learned that victory wasn't about retribution, it was about resilience, foresight, and integrity. I found myself reflecting on the journey, every challenge, every betrayal, every sleepless night that had shaped me. There had been moments of rage, of doubt, of near surrender. But each time, I had chosen to rise, to think strategically, to keep my values intact. That choice had been my real triumph. The team gathered in the conference room, faces expectant, hopeful. I shared the vision I had carried silently for months. A company built not on fear or manipulation, but on trust, innovation, and collaboration. Their eyes lit up, their nods and smiles affirming that the hardest battles often led to the most profound victories. And then, the personal closure I had long sought. I visited the places that held memories of Lorenzo's manipulation, the corner office where deals had been twisted, the old cafe where he had tried to undermine my confidence. I didn't feel anger, nor did I feel triumph. I felt liberation. I had reclaimed my narrative, my life, and my future. I knew this wasn't just about me. It was about every person who had doubted themselves, who had been pushed into corners by others' ambition or cruelty. My story, my rise, would be a quiet testament that even in the face of manipulation and deceit, one can emerge stronger, wiser, and unshakably grounded. As I stepped out into the bright afternoon, I allowed myself a moment of gratitude, not just for the victory, but for the journey. For the lessons learned, the resilience discovered, and the inner strength unearthed. I felt ready, not just for business or challenges, but for life in its full, unpredictable spectrum. And with that, Valeria Monera, no longer just a survivor, no longer just a strategist, but a leader in every sense, stepped into her new era. The storm had ended, but the legacy had just begun.
Thank you for being here. If you enjoyed this, go watch the one of the left and don't forget to hit like and subscribe to the channel for more tales of triumph over injustice and a saga of ultimate revenge.